Hello. I still remember the first time I saw Claire. It was at a friend's wedding, a warm June evening when the air smelled like roses and laughter echoed through the hall. She wore a deep green dress that hugged her in all the right places, her auburn hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. I was mesmerized. She had this way of tilting her head when she laughed, her hazel eyes lighting up like she had just heard the best joke in the world. We were introduced through mutual friends, and the moment our hands touched in that first handshake, I felt something shift. Claire was charming, confident, and had a way of making people feel like they were the only ones in the room. We danced that night, her hand in mine, moving effortlessly to a song neither of us knew. It didn't take long for us to fall in love. Our first date was at a little Italian restaurant on the outskirts of town. She ordered lasagna and teased me for being too serious when I nervously folded and unfolded my napkin. But by the time dessert arrived, I had already told her things I had never shared with anyone. That's how Claire was. She could make the walls around you crumble before you even realized it. We got married 2 years later in a small, intimate ceremony. She looked breathtaking in her white dress, a delicate lace veil framing her face. I had never been so sure of anything in my life. Our life together was simple, happy. We bought a house in the suburbs, a cozy 2-story with a fireplace that crackled in the winter and a backyard where she planted flowers every spring. Mornings were filled with sleepy kisses and the smell of coffee. Evenings were spent curled up on the couch, her feet tucked under my leg as we watched old movies. Of course, like any couple, we had our share of arguments, small things, like her tendency to leave half-empty coffee mugs around the house, or my habit of leaving the TV on too loud at night. But those were just details, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. At least, that's what I thought. Our life together settled into a comfortable rhythm. It wasn't grand or extravagant, but it was ours, and that was enough. Mornings began with the scent of fresh coffee drifting through the house, Claire humming softly as she moved around the kitchen. She had a habit of adding too much sugar to her coffee, making a face after every sip but still insisting that she liked it that way. I never questioned it. I just enjoyed watching her little rituals. Work took up most of my weekdays. My job in finance kept me busy, long hours spent staring at spreadsheets and taking calls. Claire's work, on the other hand, was fluid, unpredictable. As a freelance interior designer, some weeks she was swamped with projects, running around the city meeting clients. Other weeks, she had nothing but time, which she filled with redecorating our home or planning small weekend getaways. She had a way of making life feel lighter, more colorful. On days when work left me drained, she would drag me outside for a walk, claiming that fresh air fixes everything. We'd wander through the neighborhood, her arm looped through mine, pointing out little details I never noticed, how a neighbor's garden had changed, how the sky looked like a painting that evening. Weekends were sacred. We had our traditions, lazy Sunday mornings with newspapers we barely read, breakfast at our favorite little cafe, spontaneous road trips where we'd play old songs and sing terribly off-key. She loved antique shops, spending hours searching for the perfect piece, only to leave empty-handed more often than not. I never minded. Watching her eyes light up as she examined some old trinket was entertainment enough. Home was our safe haven. We filled it with laughter, inside jokes, and quiet moments that made up the fabric of our love. She would sit on the couch reading while I watched TV, her legs casually draped over mine. I'd wake up some mornings to find her curled up on her side, still asleep, one hand reaching out to where I had been. Looking back, those were the moments that mattered the most, not the big milestones, not the anniversaries or the vacations, but the ordinary, everyday things. The warmth of a shared blanket, the sound of her voice calling my name from another room, the way her fingers absent-mindedly traced patterns on my arm. It was a life built on love, on knowing that no matter how chaotic the world got, we would always have each other. Or at least, that's what I believed. If I had to describe our marriage in a single word, I'd say it was steady. Not in a dull, lifeless way, but in the way that makes you feel safe, like you have an anchor in a world that is constantly shifting. Claire and I had built something solid. At least, that's what I always thought. We weren't the type of couple who needed grand gestures to prove our love. It was in the little things, the everyday habits that became part of us. She always left the porch light on for me if I was working late. I always made sure her car had a full tank before the weekend, so she didn't have to worry about it. We had a habit of texting each other random things throughout the day, funny pictures, quick, thinking of you messages, or just a reminder to pick up milk on the way home. She loved movies, but she hated watching them alone. No matter how exhausted I was after work, if she put on a film, I would sit beside her, even if I dozed off halfway through. She never got mad when I fell asleep. Instead, she'd rest her head against my shoulder, letting me drift off while she whispered commentary to herself. Dinners at home were rarely elaborate, but they were ours. We had a tradition. Whoever cooked, the other did the dishes. Claire, of course, found a loophole. Whenever it was her turn to cook, she'd somehow use only one pan, one knife, and a single plate, smirking as she handed me the easiest cleanup job imaginable. I always called her out on it, and she'd just shrug, flashing that playful smile that could get her out of anything. Our home was filled with laughter, the kind that comes from truly knowing someone. She could read me like a book, knowing when to tease, when to push, and when to just be silent. She had a way of making any room feel brighter, any moment feel lighter. Of course, life wasn't perfect. We had arguments like any couple. Sometimes they were over big things, career decisions, the idea of having kids one day. Other times, they were over the ridiculous, like who forgot to replace the toilet paper roll or who left the fridge open. But we never let them linger. That was one of the things I was most proud of in our marriage. We knew how to fight, but more importantly, we knew how to forgive. I thought we were solid, unshakable. I thought we were happy, and maybe we were, for a while. At first, I didn't notice the changes. Maybe I was too wrapped up in work, or maybe I just didn't want to see them. But looking back, the signs were there, small, almost invisible at first, like tiny cracks in glass. It started with her phone. Claire had never been secretive about it before. She used to leave it lying around the house, sometimes even asking me to reply to a text if her hands were full. But suddenly, it was always with her. She kept it face down on the table, carried it from room to room, and started turning off notifications. I laughed it off at first, thinking maybe she was just getting more emails from work. Then there were the late nights. Claire had always worked unpredictable hours, depending on her projects. But now it was different. She started coming home later than usual, offering vague explanations about last-minute meetings or sudden changes to a client's design plans. "It's just been so busy lately," she'd say, brushing a kiss against my cheek before slipping away to shower, as if washing away the long hours. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something felt off. One night, I woke up around 1 a.m. and realized she wasn't in bed. The bathroom light was off. The house was silent. I got up, groggy, and walked toward the living room. There she was, sitting on the couch, phone in hand, the glow of the screen reflecting off her face. She didn't hear me at first. I could see her fingers moving quickly across the screen, her expression focused. Then, as if sensing my presence, she looked up, startled. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She blinked, then forced a small smile. "Yeah, just had some things on my mind." She turned her phone over in her hand, subtly locking the screen before setting it aside. Something tightened in my chest. I wanted to ask. I wanted to push. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, walked over, and kissed the top of her head. "Come to bed soon," I murmured. As I turned away, I could feel her eyes on me, watching. The next day, I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was imagining things. But the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it only got worse. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to pretend everything was fine, that Claire was just stressed, that I was overthinking. But once the thought planted itself in my head, it wouldn't leave. The more I tried to convince myself that nothing was wrong, the more I started noticing things that didn't add up. Like how she suddenly cared more about her appearance. Claire had always been effortlessly beautiful, never the type to spend hours on makeup or obsess over clothes. But now, she was dressing up more, even on days when she claimed she was just running errands. A fresh coat of lipstick, new perfume, a pair of heels she hadn't worn in years. "You're looking nice today," I commented one evening as she stood by the mirror, adjusting the delicate gold necklace that rested just above her collarbone. She smiled at me through the reflection. "Thanks. Just felt like putting in a little extra effort." I forced a smile. A little extra effort for who? Then there were her disappearances. One Saturday, I woke up to an empty bed. Normally, we'd sleep in, make breakfast together, maybe take a walk if the weather was nice. But Claire was gone. No note. No text. I checked my phone. Nothing. I wandered through the house, half expecting to hear the shower running or find her curled up on the couch with a book. But the place was silent. Then, just as I was pouring my first cup of coffee, I heard the front door unlock. Claire walked in, hair slightly tousled, a faint sheen of sweat on her forehead. She froze for just a second when she saw me. "You're up early," she said, forcing a casual tone as she set her purse down. I glanced at the clock. 7:30 a.m. "Where were you?" I asked, keeping my voice light, but my stomach twisted as I waited for her answer. "Oh, I went for a run," she said smoothly, already moving toward the kitchen. "Couldn't sleep, so I figured I'd get some fresh air." I looked down at her shoes. No dirt, no scuff marks. And yet, her hair was messy, her skin slightly damp. Claire wasn't a runner. And just like that, the suspicion inside me grew. I started watching more closely, noticing the way she pulled away from me in small ways. How she no longer reached for my hand absent-mindedly. How she turned her body slightly when we hugged. How her mind always seemed somewhere else. The worst part? I still wanted to believe her. I still wanted to be wrong. But something told me that whatever was happening, I wouldn't like the truth. Doubt had taken root in my mind, and no matter how hard I tried to shake it, it kept growing. It was in the little things, the way Claire's phone was always in her hand, the way she seemed distant even when she was right next to me, the way she always had a vague excuse for where she had been. I started paying closer attention, looking for anything that could explain why she had changed. At first, it was subtle, nothing obvious, just small inconsistencies that didn't sit right. One evening, as we sat on the couch, she got up abruptly, saying she was going to take a shower. That wasn't unusual. But when she walked away, she left her phone on the coffee table, unlocked. Claire never left her phone unattended anymore. My heart pounded as I stared at it. I hesitated. I had never snooped through her phone before. We had always trusted each other. But trust was exactly what had been slipping away, wasn't it? I reached for it. My hands were clammy, my breath uneven. The messages were clean. Nothing suspicious in her texts, no strange names in her call history. But when I opened her recently deleted messages, my stomach dropped. There were only a few, but one stood out. "I miss you too. I'll find time soon. Same place." The message had no name attached to it, just a number I didn't recognize. My chest tightened. I quickly copied the number and set the phone back before she returned. My mind was racing. Who was she texting, and why was she deleting messages? Later that night, when she was asleep, I took my own phone and ran the number through a search. No social media, no public records. Just a number. I barely slept. My brain was spinning, trying to piece everything together. The next day, another small but damning detail fell into place. I was in the laundry room, throwing in a load of clothes, when I saw something that made my blood run cold. A set of men's cologne lingered on Claire's scarf. It wasn't mine. I held the fabric up to my nose, inhaling the faint but distinct scent. It was subtle, but I knew it wasn't something I had ever worn. I stood there, staring at the scarf, the phone number still fresh in my mind. Claire was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. The feeling in my gut had settled into something heavier, something I couldn't ignore anymore. Claire had changed, and every passing day only confirmed that whatever was happening, I wasn't imagining it. But even as my mind whispered the worst possibilities, I still didn't have proof. I didn't have a confession, I didn't have a name, and I didn't have anything I could point to and say, "This is it. This is the moment everything changed." Still, there were signs. Too many to ignore. The deleted messages. The sudden change in her appearance. The lingering scent of cologne that didn't belong to me. Claire had always been open, transparent even, but now? Now she was careful. She picked up her phone a little too quickly when I walked into the room. She started locking the bathroom door when she showered, something she had never done before. She smiled less, laughed less. When she looked at me, it wasn't the same. There was something guarded behind her eyes, something I couldn't reach no matter how hard I tried. Then came the night she told me she was meeting Lisa for dinner. Lisa was an old college friend, someone Claire had known long before she met me. It wasn't strange for them to meet up now and then, but something about the way Claire said it, too casual, too rehearsed, made my stomach twist. I watched her get ready, pretending to read something on my phone as she stood by the mirror, fixing her hair. She took her time, carefully applying her makeup, adjusting her blouse, slipping into a pair of heels I hadn't seen her wear in years. "You look nice," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She glanced at me through the mirror and smiled. "Thanks. I don't get to dress up much these days." She leaned down, kissing me on the cheek before grabbing her purse. "Don't wait up," she said over her shoulder as she walked out the door. I sat there for a moment, unmoving. "Don't wait up. That wasn't something she usually said. It was such a small thing, an offhand remark, but I couldn't shake the way it felt. After a few minutes, I grabbed my phone and texted Lisa. Hey, just checking in. Claire said you two were grabbing dinner tonight. Hope you guys have fun. I stared at the screen, waiting. Lisa's reply came almost instantly. Dinner? No, I haven't talked to Claire in weeks. The air in the room suddenly felt too thick, my grip tightening around my phone. I didn't know what to think. Maybe Lisa had misunderstood. Maybe Claire had made plans with someone else and just forgotten to mention it. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Or maybe Claire was lying to me. My heart was pounding as I stood up and grabbed my car keys. I had no idea what I was going to do, but one thing was certain. I wasn't just going to sit here and wait. I pulled into the driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Claire's car was already there, parked neatly in its usual spot. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat there, staring at the darkened windows of our house. She wasn't supposed to be home yet. If she had really been at dinner with Lisa, she wouldn't be back for another hour, at least. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to take a deep breath. Maybe she had come home early. Maybe she had forgotten something. Maybe, but I already knew better. Slowly, I stepped out of the car and walked toward the front door. The house was quiet, too quiet. There was no sound of the TV playing in the background, no rustling in the kitchen. Just silence. I pushed the door open carefully, stepping inside. The air smelled different. Faint traces of something unfamiliar, cologne that wasn't mine. I clenched my jaw. Then I heard it. A muffled moan. I froze. For a second, my brain refused to process it. It was distant, coming from upstairs, our bedroom. Another sound followed. A low, husky laugh. A man's voice. My blood turned to ice. I moved without thinking, my footsteps quick and silent as I made my way up the stairs. Every muscle in my body was tense, my breath shallow. The bedroom door was slightly open. And then I saw them. Claire, naked, straddling a man in our bed. Her head was tilted back, her bare skin flushed. She was laughing, until her gaze flickered to the doorway. And then she saw me. Her entire body went stiff. A gasp ripped from her lips as she scrambled to grab the sheets, yanking them up to cover herself. The man beside her turned his head, confusion flashing across his face, until his eyes landed on mine. I recognized him instantly. Her ex-husband. The world around me seemed to shatter. The walls of our home, the memories we had built, the love I thought we shared, all of it collapsed in an instant. Claire's mouth opened, but I didn't hear whatever excuse she was about to spew. Because in that moment, all I felt was a rage so intense, so all-consuming, that I saw red. And they were about to feel every ounce of it. Rage surged through me like a wildfire, burning away any hesitation, any second thoughts. My entire body tensed, my fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. Claire's eyes were wide, full of panic. Her ex-husband, that bastard, just lay there for a second, blinking in stunned silence. Then he smirked. That was it. I lunged. Get the FK out of my house. Asterisk asterisk, my voice thundered through the room as I grabbed the edge of the mattress and yanked at it so hard that Claire tumbled off, hitting the floor with a gasp. Her ex barely had time to react before I snatched his clothes from the nearby chair and threw them straight at his face. Get your goddamn clothes and get the hell out. I warned. He scrambled up, his cocky expression disappearing as he fumbled to get dressed. Claire was on the floor, clutching the sheets to her chest, stammering something. Excuses, apologies, I didn't care. I didn't hear a single word. You weren't supposed to be home yet, she whispered, her voice shaking. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, I'm sorry, did I ruin your little F asterisk asterisk king reunion? I turned to her ex, who was hopping on one foot trying to shove his jeans on. You think this is funny? Screwing my wife in my own damn bed? He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him get a word in. I stepped forward and shoved him hard. He staggered backward, nearly falling over, his belt still undone. Touch me again, and or what? I snapped. You gonna fight me? Half naked. I grabbed his shoes and hurled them down the hallway. Go get those, and get the F asterisk asterisk K out before I throw you down the damn stairs. Claire was crying now. Please, let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. My voice was cold, final. Her ex was already halfway down the hallway, running like the coward he was. I followed, storming down the stairs as he snatched his shoes off the floor and bolted out the front door into the night, shirt barely pulled over his head. Good. I turned back to Claire, who was standing at the top of the stairs, still wrapped in the sheets, her face pale, eyes pleading. I made a mistake, she sobbed. Please, let's just talk. No. I pointed toward the door. You're leaving. Now. She shook her head frantically. No. This is our home. I have nowhere to go. I laughed, shaking my head. Should have thought of that before you let another man into our bed. I stormed past her, into the bedroom, and ripped open the closet. Claire gasped as I started grabbing her clothes, her purses, her belongings, everything, and throwing them onto the floor. What are you doing? She screamed. I ignored her, moving to her nightstand, yanking out the drawers, dumping them onto the bed. She tried to grab my arm, but I shoved past her, heading for the front door. I threw the door open and kicked her things outside onto the porch. Claire ran down the stairs, eyes wide with shock. Stop. You can't do this. I turned to her, my chest heaving. Watch me. She stared at me, her breath shaky. Then, as if realizing there was no way out, she snatched a pile of clothes off the ground, her shoulders shaking. I didn't wait to see what she'd do next. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and walked straight out the door, leaving her standing there in the cold. But before I left, I had one last thing to do. I drove straight to the nearest hardware store, walked in without a word, and bought a new lock. By the time I returned, Claire was gone, her car, her things, all of it. Good. I changed the lock that night. She would never step foot in this house again. And tomorrow? I was taking everything. I woke up to an unfamiliar silence, the kind that comes after a storm has passed but leaves behind destruction in its wake. The bed beside me was empty, cold, as if Claire had never been there at all. And maybe, in some twisted way, she never truly had been. Maybe the Claire I loved, the woman I thought I had married, had disappeared long before I caught her with her ex-husband in our bed. Maybe I had just been too blind to see it. But now, the illusion was shattered, and all that was left was the anger boiling inside me. Throwing her out last night had felt good, satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. But it wasn't enough. Kicking her and her pathetic excuse of a lover out of the house had been just the beginning. Now, I needed to make sure she had nothing left. No comfort. No security. Nothing. She had built a life with me, and now, I was going to take it all away. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up our joint bank account. Claire had never been interested in handling finances. She left all of that to me, trusting that I would take care of things. Well, she wasn't wrong. I had taken care of everything for us. But now, there was no us. There was only me. And she was about to learn what it felt like to be left with nothing. The balance stared back at me, $28,000. A good sum. More than enough for a fresh start. A fresh start for me, not her. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for only a moment before I began transferring the money into my personal account. I didn't hesitate, didn't stop to wonder if I was being cruel. Claire hadn't hesitated when she spread her legs for another man in our bed. Why should I show her any mercy? I drained nearly everything, leaving only a few $100s. Just enough for her to survive for a couple of days, to feel the panic set in when she realized everything she had relied on was gone. Maybe she'd call the bank, thinking there was some mistake. Maybe she'd try to call me, thinking she could talk her way back into my good graces. It didn't matter. She wouldn't get through to me. With the money taken care of, I moved on to the next step. Claire's name was still on the lease, but that wouldn't be for long. I grabbed my phone and made a call to the landlord. He was an older guy, someone I had always gotten along with. When I explained the situation, how Claire had cheated, how I had already changed the locks, he didn't even hesitate. I'll have her name removed from the paperwork today, he said. She won't have any claim to the place anymore. Good. Next, I started gathering her things. There wasn't much left, just a few items she hadn't taken when she left in a hurry. Clothes, makeup, a few books on the nightstand. I stuffed everything into garbage bags, not bothering to be gentle about it. These weren't precious belongings anymore. They were just remnants of someone who no longer existed in my life. I walked to the front door, flung the bags onto the porch, and shut the door behind me. Claire would come back eventually, hoping to talk, hoping to weasel her way out of this. But she wouldn't be stepping foot in here ever again. This house was mine now, and I wasn't about to let it be tainted by her presence any longer. The last thing I did before sitting down to breathe was pick up my phone and block her number. Then I blocked her email. Then every social media account she had. There would be no apologies, no second chances, no late-night drunken texts begging for forgiveness. She was gone. And for the first time in a long time, I finally felt like I could breathe. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter. The house was quieter, but it wasn't the suffocating kind of silence I had felt in the past few months. This was different. This was peace. Claire was gone, and she was never coming back. I had made sure of that. I spent the morning going through the motions, showering, making coffee, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open. But I wasn't working. Instead, I was waiting. I knew it was only a matter of time before Claire realized what I had done. The bank account, the lease, the locks. She would try to reach me, to fight back, to claw her way back into my life. But she wouldn't get the chance. It started with the calls. My phone buzzed on the table, Claire's name flashing across the screen. I didn't even hesitate before silencing it. Then came the texts. Claire, what the hell? Where's all the money? Claire, why isn't my key working? Claire, we need to talk now. No, Claire. We didn't need to talk. You needed to pack your bags and get out of my life for good. Then came the messages from an unknown number. Her. Again. Unknown. You can't just do this to me. Unknown. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Unknown. Please, at least talk to me. I blocked the number. An hour later, my lawyer called. She's been served, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Didn't take her long to start calling about it, though. She's panicked. Good. She's refusing to sign, he added after a moment. Says she needs time to think. That made me laugh. Time to think? Claire had all the time in the world to think when she was sneaking around behind my back, spreading her legs for another man in my house, in my bed. Now, suddenly, she wanted time? She doesn't have a choice, I said flatly. She's getting divorced whether she likes it or not. We both knew how this was going to end. Claire had no job, no assets, nothing to stand on. She would try to fight, but it wouldn't get her anywhere. She had already lost. That night, I had my first real meal in days. I cooked for myself, something simple, steak and potatoes, a cold beer on the side. I ate in front of the TV, stretching out on the couch, the space around me feeling bigger but somehow better. No tension. No lies. No watching Claire disappear into another room to text God knows who. No more pretending that things were okay. Days passed, and her attempts to contact me slowly faded. At first, she sent long emails, full of apologies, begging me to reconsider. I never read past the first few lines. Then the messages turned angry. She accused me of overreacting, of being cruel, of ruining her life. That made me laugh the most. She ruined her life. She had everything, stability, security, a husband who would have moved mountains for her. And she threw it all away for a man she had already divorced once before. A month later, the divorce was finalized. She signed the papers eventually, probably when she realized there was nothing left to fight for. My lawyer sent me a message confirming it was done. Just like that, I was free. I went out that night, for the first time in a long time. I sat at a bar alone, nursing a drink, watching the world move around me. It felt strange at first, the idea of being single again, of starting over. But then I realized something. I wasn't sad. I wasn't heartbroken. I was relieved. Claire was nothing more than a bad memory now, a lesson learned the hard way. And for the first time in years, I was excited about the future. My future. Without her. Bye-bye.